the talk tonight, half an hour, what I'll do is I'll just talk a little bit about kind of things that interest me, a little bit of the inspiration to the current garden that I'm working on at the moment. So, this is actually my third sort of large garden project that I've made for myself. So tonight's talk will be kind of showing how I've kind of gone through the process of coming to this idea, this design for this garden that I'm in currently. Um, the title of the talk, Planning a Wildlife Garden. So I think it might be nice for people just to see the kind of thinking behind the moves I've made. We've been here about 1 year now, and we're kind of fairly well established. We've got chickens and stuff in. I'm going to dig a pond next, so I've kind of have a kind of roadmap of where I'm going with it. And I'll just show how I've taken it from a field, basically, a field where there was sheep grazing to where we are now 1 year later, and the reason why I've done it a certain way. So this first image here is from the Burn. I love the Burns. Probably my favorite place to go in Ireland if I've time in May, especially. So I have a background in horticulture and architecture, but I suppose I would have been interested in all manner of plants, food plants for growing, perennial edibles, ornamental plants. But over time, I suppose what I'm trying to do now is lean more towards kind of naturalistic type of planting, where you're trying to create a garden that feels more like a place like this. This is actually an image, an image from a place in the Burn. It isn't a garden, but if I could get a garden or get a sense of the feel of a place like this in what I'm trying to do, or in part of what I'm trying to do, this is the kind of aim. And using, native plants, using some non-natives that behave themselves. That's very important to understand how the plants behave. So that's just an image I like. So say for example, if you had a small back garden, say a typical back garden might be 11 meters long, 6 or 7 meters wide, that people might have with a house. It's possible to put the elements you know, of kind of nature gardens or habitat even into a small space. So here I have main elements that apply to any size of garden, but how you arrange them and how you put them together might vary depending on the size available. So, even your approach to the garden, like for example, in the patio at the front here, we see the few weeds are allowed to flourish. You're not too concerned about an odd dandelion coming through. We've got a little meadow, a little pond, we have a little stone wall that might provide habitat for lizards. We've got a veg patch, we've got apples trained on a wall, we've got a mini woodland at the back. So you're putting a lot of little elements all into one small space. So, people can take ideas like that and kind of run with it. And you don't have to have a big garden to create a habitat. You can do it in a very confined space. This would be a kind of a section through that garden. So imagine cutting a slice down through the middle of it. You could grow ivy up a telegraph pole if you had such a thing like that, or just allow it to grow. You could put a pond in near the patio, log piles in the woodland area, and of course a little trail that runs through the whole lot so that you and the kids can go explore the garden. So, regardless of the size of the garden, you can create a mini habitat quite easily. Then for the medium-sized garden, this was a design I did before, so just showing kind of a larger scale how you might deal with the fields and the boundaries. So allowing the hedgerows to create a kind of an A shape, allowing them to grow out, and where the hedgerow meets the garden, you might allow nettles and thistles and that kind of thing to grow. And then you eventually move in further into space where you do have a bit of a lawn, because it is nice to have somewhere to relax and for the kids to play football and all that. But you take a more relaxed approach to the space. You might put in some fruit trees and underplant that then with things like comfrey and fruit bushes, which of course is great for wildlife and also good for us too. You don't have to net everything. I mean, you can leave some things open as sacrificial to birds and wildlife. And then if we move on then to another garden, this was a fairly large garden that I did a consult for someone with, and I just drew up a little scribble or doodle of it afterwards, just for my own interest, because I find sometimes trying to even, draw something from memory, it can kind of help you to design other stuff afterwards. So this garden was so big they found it really difficult, and I suggested that they take it, maybe a third or maybe slightly less than that of the garden and just allow that to rewild. It was sort of starting to go that way anyway, but I was suggesting putting tracks and trails through it. There was willow, there was a kind of a mound, and I was suggesting maybe they could look around for species that they could put into that, that would naturally grow in the wet at the base of the mound, rushes and things like that, meadow sweets, and then on the mound itself, maybe drier loving plants that might be naturally in the area. Then if we get into my own scenario here, I'll just show a kind of a run of images of how I've kind of started and how it's progressed. So this is what we started with, a field. There's my young fella Ben there out kicking a ball, and this is what it looked like from the top. It's quite sloped. It's a north-facing slope, although at the same time it's quite open. The fence along the halfway point there was used just for sheep in the upper part, and then there was a bit of a football field down the bottom. So that's what we kind of had when we moved in day one. So I was kind of looking around the area. Where I live is a place called Lacken. We're up in the hills. We're about 260, 270 elevation, depending on what part of the site you're on. So I was just looking around the hills. That's Blessington Lakes there in the background to kind of look at the terrain and what would be suitable. And kind of straight away, I just thought, well, a lot of the gardening plants that I might have used before, I didn't feel would really work in this situation because it's quite an open rural landscape, and just some plants wouldn't work for that. So trying to pick my way through what would and wouldn't work. The soil here is quite acidic. It's quite a loose kind of gravelly soil, dries out very quickly. And the types of plants in here would be heathers and gorses and things like that. This then was another issue in the garden. We would have had 7, 8, 9, 10 deer in the garden every night of the week. We have the Sika deer are kind of overrunning the area. So another issue I had were invasive species. So up the back we have a whole pile of rhododendron ponticum, which had to go. And there's an image of the deer behind me as I'm clearing the ponticum, and at the same time the deer, another invasive, were looking at me, and of course they were kind of looking at me thinking, "What's he doing here?" Because this is my space, and they had to go. Another one then that I had to clear was the cherry laurel. We had a 36-meter length of cherry laurel at the front, so I cut it all by hand down to the ground in stages and cleared it, treated the stumps. It hasn't come back, and removed all the material off site. I don't know why, but the plinth at the top of the land blocking the view. It's just maybe 10-foot cherry laurel was there blocking the view, so that had to go because again it poisons the soil. So that was about, I think it was 6 or 8 weeks work removing that. And it was the same with the rhododendron ponticum up the back. Another thing then was the fencing. So the boundaries were very important. Um, so if I try to grow anything or do anything in there, it's not going to work with the deer pressure. There's something like 300,000 deer in Wicklow, and where we are up the hill behind us there would be Black Hill. I'd regularly see 40, 50 deer in a herd, and they just decimate everything. So we had to cut back a little bit over the winter and put in the fencing. And then I started to think about ideas about what to plant, what types of trees. And that's a good thing as well for the listeners here as well, is to start doodling on paper. If it doesn't have to be an artistic sketch. It can just be a map that you download off a planning website, overlay your house, and start to think about the boundaries, how many species you need. Have you got areas where you could put in a few more trees, areas where you might need natives or maybe even some non-natives, depending. So I started sort of doodling then a layout for the site, getting into just ideas and concepts. And I've been kind of working with some of these, tweaking them, and I'll go through all this now. So this was kind of where I arrived at in terms of a doodle. And again, the main elements that we would have seen in that smaller garden for the house are still here because they're universal. So we have native trees and hedges. There are some existing. So I've been kind of working with those, adding things like holly in at the base to thicken them out a little bit. Any gaps, kind of filling in those. And that'll be ongoing work as time goes on. I wanted a really large meadow because for years I've been gathering and collecting and selling yellow rattle. I'm big into meadows, and of course, really the only plant you do need to buy is yellow rattle to create a meadow, given the right situation. So I've been sort of wanting to create my own meadow that I could harvest seed from. So I put that in, which I'll show you pictures of, and then extending the hedgerows into the site. So I wanted to create an area where there was more trees at the base of the site. So I created a kind of a Miyawaki woodland with 400 trees at the bottom. But altogether, I've planted 900 trees and shrubs since February. I just kind of went at it over the winter months to get the bones of the structure in. And then we have a wilder area up the back of the house, at the bottom of the picture, just quite a steep kind of bit of ground. So I kind of wanted to leave that do its own thing, and just the interventions there are quite minimal, removal of invasive species and that kind of thing. Then I have an orchard struck food forest I'm working on, an enclosed vegetable garden, polytunnel, pond yet to be dug, but I have an idea where I'm going to put it, and then poultry and chicken. So kind of almost a permaculture site, but full of wildlife at the same time. So the deer fencing went in, and then after that, I could start bringing in trees. It wouldn't have been possible before that because the plants that I brought from the previous house, and anything in pots, they were nibbled and eaten, and it would have been a waste of money. So unfortunately, I had to shell out for the fencing, but it was really the only way that I could actually create anything with the land. So hedging went in then. Lots of native trees went in, but I did use a little bit of hornbeam as well, for hedges that would have been kept more clipped. Hornbeam's quite good in a kind of a mountainous area, so that went in. I got a lot of the trees through 100 million trees on the land and various other charities. Native trees are quite, accessible. And then I started at the bottom of the site laying cardboard for a Miyawaki forest. So put cardboard and rolled out card that I bought straight on the soil on the grass, and then about 8 to 10 inches of mulch, and basically let that on the ground and planted through that in little pockets, cut little holes, and that's worked out well. Then yellow rattle, the slope part is very difficult to do much with that. So, in the sloped areas, create a fairly large meadow, and you walk down through that then to get to the lower part of the site. It's a great thing to introduce into long grass, and I know you've recently done a talk on this as well. And over time, then the species of plants that are already there, the seeds that are dormant, will develop, and I'm hoping in time we might start to see some orchids coming through once as the soil settles in a bit. Um, Up the back then on the bank, on the terraces, with the removal of the rhododendron, I introduced species like snowdrops, cyclamens, hellebores, things like that. So they're not invasive species. They're technically, ornamental plants, but at the same time, in the winter months, when there's not a lot of native stuff flowering, some of these plants are known to be good for pollinating insects and that. So that's I think I put in maybe 1,500 snowdrops, and they're easy to put in. But same with the hellebores. I just went and got a load of those, and cyclamens and things like that, and I'll add to that over time. But I've also kept what was already there, so I kept all the mosses and things like that, and things like bilberries and frockins and anything like that was coming up, and just it's really just the removal of the rhododendron, and also maybe a little bit of control on the bracken. Bracken is a little bit out of control in the area. Um, and then on the site, we have a well that actually in winter the water table is quite high, so it overflows into a pipe that comes down into the land. So we've kind of a temporary little pond that develops in the winter months. So I put a little bridge over that. But it got me thinking that I need to create another pond separate to this, a larger pond. So I'm going to be doing that hopefully next. These are my two young fellas here, and great little helpers to have. So this is what it's looking. Well, this is what it looked like then. The kind of bones of that sketch that I had shown with the little bridge going over the little temporary pond. It's almost like a seasonal pond. We have the little arc there is enclosing a vegetable garden, or what will be a vegetable garden in this picture, and then we have the 400 native trees down the bottom. Now, the bottom left-hand corner of the site was quite wet, so if you're looking at a site, you really need to think about where the different soils are, and it was very damp and wet along that bottom left-hand corner. So I put willow down there, and then to the right of that, then I put in a mix of 7 or 8 different species of natives. The thing right in the middle, that big brown thing, is actually a dead hedge. So as I was trimming back bits of branches to get the deer fencing in, what to do with all the hedging? Don't want to be burning it, don't want to be paying for it to be taken off site, or mulching it. So create a bit of a dead hedge there, which I can add to over time. Oops, sorry. And then at the side of the house, then we had this kind of what would have been previously the garden, I suppose. They would have grown vegetables here, but it had been kind of let go a bit, and so just decided to sort of start doing a bit here. This is going to be for chickens, and putting in a kind of stone wall with rocks I'm digging out of the ground. Every time you put the spade in the ground, there's rocks coming out. So I was thinking, well, if I have all these rocks, maybe I could create a loose dry stone wall, and then that might be good for things like lizards over time. So in terms of, creating habitats, using what you have to make another habitat on site. And then in that area, then I was thinking with the chickens from a previous garden on the right, you see an image of an apple tree underplanted with comfrey. And then we have bush fruit and strawberries under that, which hard to see in the picture, but you can see a kind of a little chicken coop at the back. So I'm going to recreate that sort of idea in that space and create kind of a natural habitat for chickens and poultry. They kind of like that kind of cover and interest. So that's the plan for there. And of course, that will bring all manner of wildlife in at the same time. And this is then how I started creating the kind of growing space, the kind of vegetable growing space, cardboard rolled out straight onto the grass. And then I used mushroom compost. I brought in about 12 cubic meters of mushroom compost. And that basically went straight on the cardboard and then bark mulch for the pats. And it's worked out really well. Then I started sowing seeds and at the same time leveling a space for a polytunnel. Polytunnels are great to have in a garden. Of course, there wasn't much flat ground where we are, so we had to create flat ground for that. And then the seeds I'm using, then a lot of the vegetable seeds would be open pollinated, organic, so that I can save my own seed going forward as well. So this is the Miyawaki woodland. It's done. This was early on. It actually is doing really well. More or less all of the trees are surviving. I haven't watered it at all, and I haven't lost any trees. And I'm putting it down to the fact that the mulch layer has probably developed a mycelium at this stage, and there's a moisture that's been trapped there anyway from the winter rain. This would have actually been put down when it was very, very wet. So any moisture that was under there may have been held onto, and it seems to work much better than other parts of the garden where I have planted directly into the grass. So yeah, the density of this is actually quite high. This is between 3 and 5 trees per square meter, so it's very really high. The other thing then is the meadow itself. I have a lot of imbalance in the soil because it was heavily grazed. There would have been a lot of compaction in the soil, and as a result of that, then I have a lot of docks and thistles. And it is great to have some docks and thistles in a garden. We need them for certain types of beetles, but I think it was a bit out of balance where the creeping thistles, especially, were threatening to overcome everything. So what I spent a couple of weeks sort of thinning them out, not taking everything out, but just sort of controlling them a little bit, using this special dock tool or rag fork, as they would have been known, dock rag and creeping marsh and creeping marsh and spear thistle would have been the three. The main one to be concerned about, I suppose, would be the creeping thistle. The other two are quite easy to take out. As I said, I'm not taking them all out, just to try and kind of thin them where I want the meadow grasses to grow because they create too much shade. Um, so like even already, I mean, there's loads of habitats on site. There's parts of the garden where the soil is fairly dry and shallow, and we've got mining bees. I've actually mining bees down the bottom. And I found this door beetle, must be about an inch. It's a massive big beetle. It's a type of burrowing dung beetle. Found that in the garden. We've got things like, your typical cabbage white, large white, small white, and all that. And I'm not concerned about that because, they will do a bit of damage, but at the same time, a balance has to be struck. And at the moment, the garden isn't in balance. But over time, all these things being there, the things that eat them will arrive, I'm hoping, and the balance will be struck. So I'm not too concerned. I'm not netting anything. The butterfly in the picture here is actually on an nasturtium, which I've planted quite a bit of around the vegetable area to try and act as a sacrificial crop for brassicas, because the mustard oil in the nasturtium is more favourable for them So when they land and taste that, they're more likely to lay their eggs on that plant as a sacrificial plant. It's worked partly. On the bottom left, then we have their shield bug. So on the back of my French beans, there were some shield bug, green shield bug. And again, I wouldn't be bothered with taking them off. I mean, that's all part of it. We have to accept that these things are supposed to be here, and we want them to be here. So that's what it's looking like kind of recently. So we've this big meadow on the slope, tracks going through it. There's an orchard on the left-hand side with lots of native Irish apple varieties, or not native, but Irish varieties that were found. We have some cob nut and stuff like that. The veg area is in the middle in that arc shape, and then the polytunnel's gone in. So that bank of 400 trees is down the bottom as well. Then up the back, then what I'm doing is I'm trying to take an even lighter hand up here where I'm just removing the invasives and basically bashing the bracken. So we have a lot of bracken in the surrounding fields where they're not grazed, they're just left, and the bracken is dominant. So what I'm trying to do is just whack it. I've done it about 3 or 4 times this season just to kind of just bruise it. So basically go in and I use a big heavy rake, a rake that's used for spreading like tarmac or gravel, and just come in and kind of rake that through the bracken to bruise it in several places, and it tries to recover. But in the process of doing that, it weakens the system. So that's the what I'm doing there. And I've noticed a huge difference since putting in the deer fencing. What's happening is plants that would have been eaten to the ground are now starting to pop up. We have a lovely plant called devil's bit. Some people know it as devil's bit scabious, but it's not actually a type of scabious, it's a different one. So we have a bit of that coming up. We have regeneration of foxgloves and things like that. But there would have been virtually no grass on this slope because the soil here would have been excavated when the house was built. So it's pure kind of grit. It's really poor. There'd be a little bit of gorse coming through as well, which I will control because of the fire hazard that it presents. I will keep a few gorse on site, but there's plenty of it in the area in any case. Um, and so this is the results of all that. And then we've got our Calabrese in the garden there, the polytunnels in. Just managed to get a few tomatoes in before the weather, before the season was over for it, but they're a little bit late, but that's all going well enough then. And another thing then I was doing was with grass clippings and that. So if you're generating all these grass clippings, you might as well use them. So I just threw them straight onto the existing grass and planted a squash or in there, and put a pole in so I know where the root system are, and that's just basically doing its own thing. The grass clippings are suppressing what's underneath. I've watered that a few times, but I haven't need to water it very much because the actual grass itself acts as a way to retain moisture. It's really good. What I'll probably do in time is I'll probably sheet mulch this out, and then when I create enough compost myself, I'll slowly turn it into beds. Um, Another thing as well, I'm not too concerned about are pests on the plants. Like here we have mealy aphids on nasturtium. It's just an indicator that at the moment it's a new garden. The system's out of balance. Hopefully in time, more and more ladybirds will move in and they'll take care of that. At the same time, we're getting a bounty, a huge harvest out of the garden in any case. So it's not an issue. Um, then we have the homemade compost system. So I did bring in a lot of material at the start, but I'm hoping from now on I'll be able to generate my own. So I've just created a big bay there today with compost, and of course then that compost will have lots of living creatures in it, and that's much better than bringing in something that's been sterilized or processed where it won't have all the worms and bugs and insects. So in time it's better. This is actually the Miyawaki forest, taken about 2 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago, or woodland area, won't call it forest. It's absolutely thriving. Some interesting plants came up as well. We have pignut in the garden, which is an indicator that maybe at one stage there would have been, maybe an ancient woodland here or something like that. You'd imagine long enough ago, if you go back, the whole hill would have been woodland at some stage. We've also got bluebells on site too, which is exciting. So yeah, I'm delighted with that. This is what it looks like then, kind of looking back up the slope. So you've got the veg garden in the middle there, and then the upper part of the slope then is is the meadow, and it's absolutely packed full of yellow rattle. I'm hoping in time then that'll develop. And what I'll do now is I'll cut that pretty soon when I get a chance. I might leave it stand a bit longer, maybe cut it in September. I'll cut it with the I have an Austrian hoe there. I'll cut it and I'll rake it away, and then what I'll do is I'll keep it short for the winter and let it off again then from the end of February. So yeah, so that's what's happening there. And then what I'm currently working on at the moment is the side garden where the chickens are going in. So this would have been a doodle I made back kind of early on of what I wanted to do here. So I was thinking maybe have a stone wall with all the rubble, maybe put in a chicken area, and underneath have the chickens underneath some fruit trees. So that's what I'm actually doing at the moment here with all these rocks. Just putting in the electric fencing at the moment for the chickens because the mink and fox will make light work of them otherwise. So they're going to have their kind of little coop and enclosure, and then a wider area that we can let them out into as well. I can move that around a bit if I need to too. So that's kind of my talk. Hopefully, it's giving people some ideas of an approach to planning a garden for wildlife. I mean, planning a garden for wildlife is also planning a garden for production of food for yourself as well at the same time. So, there's not much in the way of ornamental plants in the garden at the moment. I'll probably not do a whole pile of that because I'm actually more interested in creating a space that's kind of mainly the backbone of native trees and shrubs and useful plants that I'll use for cooking and that'll actually give back something, but at the same time not cause problems. So hopefully that was okay for you. I don't think I've gone too long. Am I all right for time? Yeah, it's about half an hour. Yeah, so we'll leave it at that if that's okay, and then we'll have a few questions.
That's great. Thank you, Patrick. I love that
Cheers.
view there you have from your
Yeah,
outdoor chair.
yeah, I don't sit down very much now, but I did for that picture for a few minutes.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's been full on, but I'm just determined to kind of get it to a stage where I can run courses and workshops from the garden, which is what I'm hoping to start in the autumn. Just need to
brilliant.
look into
Thank you so
insurance.
much. Thanks
Yeah,
for
no bother.
that
Thanks.
was really well captured. Your garden planning from the beginning and the work in progress. I'm sure everything will, flourish as expected. I'm interested in your Miyawaki forest area.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, is this something you also advise people to do if they have small area for planting woodland, or is that
Yeah, there's different methods. Like I've been on I've been involved in school work a lot. I work in schools, and I've been in schools where they've just planted the trees directly into shortcut grass. That's fine too. But I think in terms of resilience for moisture, I'm so glad that I actually went to the trouble of putting in the cardboard and the mulch, because had I not done that, I would imagine those trees would be struggling a lot more than they are right now. So one method is to just plant your trees directly into shortcut grass. You just dig a thing called a T-notch, just a spade in both directions, and lift up a flap and flip it in. Really quick to do, absolutely fantastic. But the method I did took a bit longer. So the mulch went down first. Sorry, the cardboard went down first. You can buy it in long rolls of 100 meters at various different widths. And then the mulch then went down on top of that about 8 to 10 inches. And then what I did is I kind of cleared a little area and cut a little hole and then planted a T-notch through that, which took a little bit more time than I would have liked. But the reason it took so long is that normally what you would do is you'd put the cardboard and mulch down in the autumn, say in October, November. Then over the winter, you would wait until say March the following year before planting through it. I didn't have the luxury of that because the fencing only went up in February, so I had to do the whole lot in one go. But what would happen if you had time to wait is that it would settle down a little bit, and there wouldn't be as much volume of material. It would kind of compact or settle a little bit. So that took a while, but I'm glad I did it, and it's something I've wanted to do for a long time because you hear people like pocket forests, and I've seen them in lots of places. In Tala now, there's a crowd called oh God, what are they called again? Stepping stones, yeah, stepping stone forest. They do that Miyawaki technique. I've seen it in Sean Walsh Park there in Tala, and I was thinking, God, there's almost every native tree in a 20 foot forest. I was thinking, right, I can do one of those mini forests in my own garden. So just wanted to do it for myself, and yeah, I've done it, and so far it's so good, you know.
In many ways, I suppose it's the mulching. Miyawaki is very trendy at the moment,
It is very
but
trendy.
it's very early. And while you can say you see a mini forest in a small area, in 30 years, you're probably going to be left with only a couple of species, that the
Yeah,
stronger species are going to survive and the others
yeah,
aren't.
yeah,
It's quite funny. I was reading a paper recently that there's actually very little scientific evidence to back up any of the claims
yeah.
behind Miyawaki.
I've heard that very recently as well, that there's a little bit of skepticism around it. I did it anyway because I'd seen it so many times, so many places. I thought, you know what, I'll give it a go. Yeah, I mean, the planting distances do seem very, very close. And I imagine, yeah, like everything, they will self-thin anyway. The stronger species will dominate. So,
Yeah, yeah. I was going
yeah,
to ask you,
we'll see how
will
it
you
goes.
look to thin them? Will you look to thin the trees
I may
eventually?
even thin it a bit myself so I can move
Yeah,
through it more easily.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it develops.
yeah.
If anyone has any questions, please do put them in the Q&A section. I don't think I've missed any so
It's
far.
the kind of thing you do with free trees, but not if you had to pay for them.
No, I didn't pay for the trees. No, I you wouldn't pay for them. I mean, 150 a tree, you'd be broke pretty quickly putting them in at that ratio.
It's
But
also
that
if people have a small number of trees and they don't have the time and they can't, the efforts of
yeah,
mulching that you've gone through, if people don't have the time for that and,
yeah,
would you suggest that they just plant regularly?
yeah.
It's probably better off.
Just plant them with the T-notch method. I was in a school there earlier on this year in Naas there, and there was a company that came in, and I helped a little bit as well with some school kids, and we planted something like 1,300 trees in 4 hours. There was some involvement from a corporate group as well. They came in with 30, 40 employees, and yeah, the whole thing went in pretty quick. We allowed a few tracks and trails through it, and a coop, little opening too. I haven't been back there since. I probably think with the weather we've been having and no water, it will be very interesting to see how they survive, especially things like Scots pine, which are they don't like the dry. They don't like the dry when they're establishing, you know. But it is what it is. I mean, this year's been exceptional, so I think everyone's getting caught out. There's gardens closing because they can't keep up with the watering, and they can't be showing the garden, that sort of way. So it's been a tough year for everybody. The only watering I'm really doing, as I say, is the polytunnel. I'm not watering the outside veg. Maybe water it once a week, twice. That was it. Just a heavy watering, but even the mulch in the vegetable area, because of the volume of it, it must obviously be retaining a lot of moisture because we're getting a great crop at the moment, potatoes and everything else.
And can I ask you about the pond? Because you said you haven't dug one yet, but there was one in the photograph. So
Yeah,
do you make
that's
one? Yeah.
that's it's an overflow from the wellhead, and in
Okay.
winter when the water table goes high, it flows into this little kind of area that's down halfway down the garden. So it's a kind of seasonal pond. There wouldn't be a whole lot of life in it because it's not there during the summertime. But it just got me thinking that yeah, I must dig a pond or a few ponds in different places, maybe even a few ponds of different sizes as well, because obviously water is very important for attracting wildlife into the garden, and that'll then complement the meadow. So I'll have the pond and the meadow not too far apart, so that any frogs that are in the pond in the winter time and that if they're overwintering, they can use the long grass in the meadow then for the summer for slugs and snails and whatever else they're looking for. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Patrick. Then we have a couple of questions. I see you have a hot bin or compost bin. How are you finding it near the
Oh
hen enclosure?
I mean I'm on attempt 5 with the hot bin now. I tried to return it, but they won't take it back. Anyway, I think you'd want to basically give up the job and spend every day, all day, tending your hot bin with the instruction. I think it's a design that's not resolved, and I've gone back to basically the base system because I mean it's fine. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't recommend it personally, but I'll keep trying with it. I just think that it's temperamental. You can get it up to heat, but maintaining that heat is tricky. Yeah, but yeah, it's I personally think the bay systems are better. A three bay system, where you fill the two outside bays and then you fill the middle one as you turn it. I think that's better. Well, for the volume of material I'd be creating now, I need that, and I'll have the two. I'll have the hot bin up near the house so that I can kind of put in, say, chicken carcasses and things like that in moderation once it gets up to temperature. Because that's why I got it, because we don't have bin collection here, so I have to basically try and manage that in a way that I'm reducing the amount that's going off site as much as possible. But no, I can't recommend the hot bin, unfortunately. I know other people have had luck with it, but maybe it's because I'm so busy with everything else I haven't been able to give it the time. But I mean, I'm pretty good at these things. I mean, I have been gardening for a long time, but no, a little bit disappointed with it. Yeah.
Brendan says, excellent talk, Patrick. What's your plan for managing the meadow? And maybe tell us more about the dead hedge, please.
Yeah, so with the meadow, I'm basically going through the meadow. Well, I spent quite a lot of time. I probably spent most of the summer tending the meadow, basically trying to reduce the amount of dominance from things like there's areas in the meadow where clearly bales of food or material was put down for feed for the sheep, and it's quite nutrient dense. So in those areas, there's a lot of nettles coming up, and there's some areas then where there's a lot of docks, and in general, creeping thistles, going through it. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to kind of calm it down a little bit or settle it in a little bit by removing some of that, well, quite a lot of that, so that it gives a chance for other stuff to come through. And it'll take a few years of doing that to kind of get it to a stage where I can kind of leave it where there's a few things. And I know meadows take on a life of their own after a little while, but at the moment it's out of balance because of what was there previously, because of all the poaching with the sheep and the grazing. So what I'm going to do next with the meadow is I'll probably leave it a bit longer because I kind of like having it there and I don't want to have to cut the grass. So I'll probably leave it there till September, or maybe even late September, and I'll go in then and I will try my siding skills. I got an Austrian side there from Fruital Farm, so I'm going to do that, and then I will rake it all up, and I will then make a big pile of it and turn it into some sort of compost that I might use as a mulch around trees and shrubs. I wouldn't put it in the veg area or anywhere near stuff like that, but I'll make use of it. Yeah, so it's mainly just the docks and the creeping thistle would be the two big ones I'm a bit concerned about. I do have a few other species as well, but like I kind of like them. Like I have common sorrel, which I quite like. So I'm kind of disrupting it or taking bits and pieces out here or there. And I'll kind of work with it. It's an ongoing process.
And your dead hedge, Patrick,
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, the dead hedge. I mean, basically, before the guy was coming to install the deer fencing, he said to me, "Oh, if you could clear back a few branches." So the dead hedge was put in that position purely randomly. Worked out quite nice actually where I ended up, but purely randomly. I had all this material, and I was thinking, God, I don't want to have to get a wood chipper. I kind of like the idea of a date hedge. I've kind of known about them for a long time, so I was like, oh, I'll make a bit of a date hedge, and that's as far as I got with it. I would have made it probably longer if I had more material, and maybe I will make more date hedges around the place, along the perimeters, as I manage the hedgerows going forward. But yeah, it's the idea is that you put posts into the ground at fairly close centres, maybe a couple of foot apart in a kind of a zigzag, and then you just cut your branches quite long, say 8, 10 feet long, and just lay them down between the posts, and you just keep layering it up and up and up. And the idea then is it breaks down and forms a natural kind of habitat. I actually built the hedge as well because the kids wanted a cubby, and I was like, right, I'll build a little dead hedge and we'll have a cubby, and everyone will be happy at the same time. So, yeah. Yeah.
And because you've just started this, you're fresh into is it less than a year or so that you've
We're a
started
year and a
on the
bit,
work?
yeah.
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 Where have you seen kind of wildlife come in very quickly? Have you had like really nice
Well, we,
surprises?
we we have a lot of there's a lot of wildlife. I mean, I've seen badgers on the lane. We have red kites flying overhead. We have buzzards regularly. We have a cuckoo. Well, obviously not all the time, but he was there. I could hear him, and I could actually see him in the trees in the neighbours just over the way. So there's a lot of wildlife. But I mean, I'm trying to create you know places for insects as well. I mean, the actually mining bees and the beetles and all that. I love the fact that my kids go out into the meadow with their nets and they're just exploring. And they have a thing at the side garden they call Bugopolis, where they're putting all the bugs in. And of course, when we got the chickens the other day, then I was like, well, we could feed a few of the caterpillars to the chickens. So suddenly now the chickens are becoming part of the circle of life, and the caterpillars are now being fed to the chickens. So on the one hand they're loving, and on the other hand they're giving them to the chickens. So yeah, no, it's there's a lot of insect life in the garden. I had a European hornet fly over yesterday. Huge, big thing. I was worried for a second. I was like, "Is that an Asian hornet?" But no, it was even bigger. It was the European hornet, massive thing. Must have been an inch long. But yeah, I'm on the lookout for stuff all the time, and it's a very simple little plan. I mean, I'm only really managing it for wildlife and have a little patch where I want to control to be able to grow veg, and the polytunnel. The rest is kind of working with what's there, and just gently kind of. I don't want to lose my view. I just have a few little bushes at the front there that'll come up in time. All pollinator friendly stuff. I mean, there's no point in trying to make this into something that it isn't. I mean, this is a country garden, and yeah,
Yeah.
I'm trying to find what works for it, and I kind of know what doesn't work for it, and by not doing that, then I think
Yeah.
it's working at the moment, and
Trial and error.
I like
Yeah.
where it's going. So yeah,
There's a
Nolene,
quest.
sorry, Sharon.
Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah, you've just spotted it.
Norleen has asked, is planting comfrey under fruit trees recommended? Is there a risk of
yeah.
invasion into native woodland
No,
beside
no. Well,
orchard?
you have to be very careful about what type of comfrey you plant. So the type of comfrey you want to get is a thing called bocking, specifically bocking 14. The only supplier I know of in Ireland is the Organic Centre in Leitrim. They can send you out little root cuttings of it, or you might find it from some friend of yours or whatever. But what it is it doesn't seed everywhere. If you plant common comfrey or Russian comfrey, any of the other comfreys, it will destroy your garden. But bocking 14 comfrey, it doesn't spread, it doesn't create seeds, and I'll be planting it under all the fruit trees. So I got a little bit of it from a friend of mine who originally got it from the Organic Centre, and I've planted that under one or two of the fruit trees and at the back of the polytunnel there. And when that gets established, I'll dig up some, take root cuttings and propagate it. But I'll put that around each of the fruit trees and nut trees, and I'll create a little kind of mini kind of foresty garden in what is now the orchard. So I've given each fruit tree about 4.5 meter spacing, and I've planted fruit bushes between them as well. And over time, I'll work that kind of forest garden type thing into that area. Yeah, so it is a very, very good idea to put comfrey under a fruit tree, because what you can do is you can chop and drop, and by chopping and dropping, it releases potassium, and that potassium then helps with the fruiting, the flowering and all of that aspect of it. I've put it at the back of the tunnel as well, because I chop and drop comfrey to use it as a mulch under tomatoes. So anywhere where you want potassium, it's a great thing to have. Yeah,
Just on the cherry laurel hedge, we've had quite a few people who've had issues with cherry laurel. You
yeah.
said you took it off site. Where did you get to take the cherry
I
laurel? Like, did the tick take it or?
I took it to a civic amenity, Ballymount Civic Amenity. So it's a green waste facility, and it went there. So it was basically cut to the ground in stages, chopped up, put into black bins and bags, and then I removed it off site. The reason I took it off site is because cherry laurel um, releases chemicals into the soil that prevent germination. I didn't want to heap it in a corner down the garden. I just wanted it off site. It'll regrow if it's piled up in a heap. It'll just start to reshoot, and I have a big issue with the plant. It's a species that shouldn't be sold in Ireland, and tens of millions are spent every year by NPWS clearing it from woodland and areas, and yet at the same time you can buy it. And I'm part of a group called West Wicklow Environmental Network, and we recently hosted a talk on it. We had owned Connaughton from the Gaelic Woodland Trust, and he's involved in running campaigns to clear that. He's calling for its banning. And I'd be very much the same. The way I cleared it, the way I got rid of it was I cut it to the ground, and the last cut, I then drilled it and used SPK. I I had never used any weed killer up until then, but other than physically getting a digger in to dig out the root system, it would have come back. So I just thought about it for a long time, and I basically used a little spray on each stump, and none of it has come back. So it's now off-site, finished. I don't need to do that again. And I just felt, look, um, that's where a weed killer might be of use to remove something that's invasive, but I wouldn't be going around, using weed killer on the gravel paths or anything like that. That wouldn't be. It's only for very specific purposes. I did the same thing with most of the larger rhododendron ponticum, but the smaller stuff is quite easy to take out. If you get it early, it's quite shallow rooting rhododendron in general. And I'm just on the lookout now. I do patrol, just check for any seeding, which there will be a little bit. I found a few bits and pieces, but it's nothing. It's nothing that can't be kept under control or eventually eradicated. The issue I have is that the area there's rhododendron ponticum growing at field scale in the area. Um, so there's always going to be the issue of it coming back. In a way, the hooves of deer would be spreading it as well. Now I don't have them anymore, so I'm hopeful that I can keep it off my little patch anyway and do my bit. But there's a wider issue with invasive species. Yeah, that needs to be addressed.
Very good, Sharon. Sharon, do you have any other questions for Patrick?
No, it was mainly the cherry laurel because that's one that we've come across a lot of people having issues with. And sometimes people were a bit worried that the civic tips might not take it because of it being an invasive.
Yeah, I mean,
They
I
take the hedge cuttings anyway,
yeah.
so
Well, it went into the green waste. I presume that's all composted, hot composted or something like that. So that process would kill it. If it's chopped up real small and hot composted, say in windrow type system, that'll do the job on it. But I didn't have the space or capacity to do that here. Yeah.
Patrick, do you get asked for advice on particular situations where, say, for example, very salty, windy, exposed areas, people want to
For
plant an
planting, is
orchard
it?
or, hedge? How do you tackle like shelter belt sort of, what would you
Yeah, well, I
advise?
mean, I have a fairly exposed site. We're up in the hills here when the east wind comes in. So yeah, shelter is important. So I mean, that's why I planted that arc-shaped hedge around the veg garden just to try and reduce. I'll keep it low. I'll keep it to a meter, but that'll give me about 7, 8 meters of protection behind it. So yeah, shelter is very important. I do have existing hedgerows. The thickest one is to the north, and now that new planting at the bottom will protect from the north. But yeah, there are hedgerows. Sorry, there are existing hedgerows, and I will allow them to grow to a certain height. I'll probably cut the hedges back every couple of years rather than every year. I won't trim them into manicured square sort of hedges. They'll be allowed to bush out and to grow, and then every few years they'll be kind of pulled back a little bit then. But yeah, hedgerows and hedgerows are really important in windy locations, especially in seaside locations. But then again, what's more important is plant selection. So if you choose your plants for that kind of conditions, then they're tolerant of it. I mean, there's plants I'd love to grow that I can't grow here because, like, say, for example, Crambe maritima, sea kale, I'd love to grow that as a plant, but I know there's no point because it's not suitable for here. So you have to know you have to be realistic. I mean, people give you plants, and sometimes the plants they give you might not work here. So what you might do is pass them on to someone else, or maybe give them to someone who has a more suitable area. I mean, I will grow. I'm gonna actually try and grow vines. I'm in touch with someone about maybe growing a few outdoor grapes. I was in Wales there recently, and you know, it is possible to grow grapes outdoors in Ireland now. So I'll grow some in the tunnel. I've left space for that, a black and a white, a variety, and then I will try my hand at a few outdoors as well. But yeah, I mean, we're not too high up. We're 260. I mean, you could be a bit higher. My mother-in-law's at 350, but yeah, I mean, the thing about gardening is you've got to try it for yourself in your location because you will only know what works for your garden if you're gardening in your garden, and what works in your garden may not work for someone else down the road because their aspect, their soil, the field next door could be totally different. So you have to be prepared to fail. Like, I mean, if stuff doesn't work out, that's fine. Just keep going. I've tens of things in my head that I'm going to do next, and not all of it will work, but a good percentage of it will work, and that means overall it'll be successful. So that's what it's about.
Great. That sounds like a perfect note to finish on, Patrick. Yeah, you've summarized that really well. It's all about what we're keep trying, and
Yeah.
don't let the fear of going wrong stop you from
No.
taking actions.
No.
Loads of compliments for you here. Great to hear your garden developing, and thanks for an informative talk and impressive work. And so thank you for all that, Patrick, and great advice on various things we could be
Cheers.
doing
Thanks very much for
in the
having me.
garden.
My pleasure.
Yeah, so we'll finish with that and have and good night to everybody. And thanks very much, Patrick and Sharon.
Thank you very much. Bye
Thanks,
now.
Patrick.
Bye.